Every single day, someone is manipulating you. And the terrifying part is, you are saying yes to them with a smile on your face without even realizing it. Think about the last time you bought something you did not really need, or the last time you agreed to do a favor that you actually wanted to say no to, or the last time you stayed loyal to a belief just because you had publicly stated it once, even when the facts changed. That was not you making a free decision. That was your brain running on autopilot, and someone, somewhere, knew exactly how to press your buttons. What if I told you that the world's most powerful salespeople, con artists, cult leaders, and even governments all use the exact same 6 psychological principles to control human behavior? And what if I told you that once you understand these principles, you can protect yourself from being manipulated, and you can start using them ethically to change your own life? This is not a theory. This is 40 years of scientific research, real experiments, real results, compressed into one book that has changed the way the world thinks about persuasion. The book is called Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, written by Dr. Robert Cialdini, and today we are going to break down every single idea, every experiment, every insight from this book, step by step. By the end of this video, you will never look at a sales pitch, a relationship, or even your own decisions the same way again. Before we go deep, if you want content like this, content that actually gives you tools to build a better life, make better decisions, and think like the top 1%, then subscribe to Millionaire Playbook right now. This channel is not about motivation without action. We break down the world's most powerful books into life-changing, implementable systems. Hit that subscribe button and let us keep building together. Part 1. The Author and the Foundation. Who is Robert Cialdini, and why should you trust him? Dr. Robert Cialdini is not just an academic sitting in a lab. He spent years undercover, actually disguising himself and training inside car dealerships, fundraising organizations, advertising agencies, and door-to-door sales companies. He wanted to understand from the inside how these professionals got people to say yes. What he discovered was this. Out of the thousands of tactics used by compliance professionals, almost all of them trace back to just 6 fundamental psychological principles, 6 weapons of influence that are so deeply wired into human psychology that they work automatically, almost like pressing a button. He calls them weapons because they can be used against you if you do not know about them, but they can also be used as tools if you do. Here's the core idea of the entire book, and this is important to understand before everything else. Humans, like animals, have evolved to use mental shortcuts. These shortcuts help us navigate a complex world without burning our brains out on every single decision. Most of the time, these shortcuts serve us well, but the moment someone learns to trigger your shortcut with the right stimulus, they can get you to do almost anything. Cialdini uses the example of a mother turkey. A turkey mother is a great parent. She protects her babies, keeps them warm, nurtures them. But here's the strange part. All of that mothering behavior is triggered by a single sound, the cheep cheep of baby turkeys. If something makes that sound, she treats it as her baby. If something does not make that sound, even if it's her actual chick, she ignores it or attacks it. Scientists proved this by placing a stuffed polecat, which is a natural predator of turkeys, near the mother. Normally, she would attack it furiously, but when they put a tiny speaker inside the stuffed polecat that played the cheep cheep of baby turkeys, the mother embraced the polecat. She tried to mother her own enemy because of a sound. This is the click and whir effect. Click, one stimulus is triggered. Whir, the automatic behavior begins. And here's the unsettling truth. We are not so different from that turkey. The 6 principles Cialdini discovered are the 6 most powerful click triggers in human psychology. Let's go through each one. Part 2. Principle 1. Reciprocation. The first principle is called reciprocation. The rule of reciprocation is one of the most powerful social forces in all of human civilization. It says this: When someone gives us something, we feel deeply obligated to give something back. This is not a feeling we can easily override. It's baked into our wiring. Think about how universal this is. In 1985, Ethiopia, one of the world's poorest nations at the time, was struggling with a severe famine. They had almost nothing. Yet that year, Ethiopia sent money to Mexico after Mexico suffered a devastating earthquake. Why would one of the world's poorest countries send aid to another country when its own people were starving? The answer is this. In 1935, 50 years earlier, Mexico had sent aid to Ethiopia when Italy invaded. The obligation from half a century ago across all cultural and geographic distance, across poverty and famine, was still powerful enough to produce a reciprocal act. That's how deep reciprocation runs in human beings. Now here's how this gets weaponized against you every day. Free samples at the supermarket. The attendant smiles and hands you a little cube of cheese. You eat it, now you feel oddly obligated to buy the product, even if you weren't impressed. Why? Because you accepted something and the rule says you must give back. The Amway Corporation built an entire business model on this. They created something called the bug, a bag full of product samples left at a potential customer's home for free for 24 to 72 hours. When the salesperson came back, the customer, having used the products, felt obligated. The company reported extraordinary sales increases from this single technique. But the most powerful version of reciprocation is what Cialdini calls rejection then retreat, also known as the door-in-the-face technique. Here's how it works. A Boy Scout approaches Cialdini and asks him to buy $5 tickets to a charity ball. He declines. The scout then says, "Okay, well, would you at least buy a $1 chocolate bar?" Cialdini buys 2 chocolate bars he didn't want. Why? Because the Boy Scout made a concession, retreating from $5 to $1. And when someone makes a concession to you, you automatically feel pressure to make a concession back. The only concession Cialdini had available in that moment was to buy the candy. Cialdini and his team ran experiments proving this works even with significant requests. Asking someone to volunteer as a counselor for 2 hours produced only 17% agreement when asked directly, but first asking them to commit to 2 years of unpaid volunteer work produced 50% agreement when they retreated to just 2 hours. The big ask made the small ask feel like a gift. How to apply this in your life? Understand that every free sample, every small gift, every unsolicited favor someone does for you may come with an invisible obligation. Before you accept something, ask, does this person want something in return? That is not cynicism, that's awareness. Ethically, you can use reciprocation yourself. Do meaningful, genuine favors for people without keeping score. Relationships built on generosity create natural loyalty and goodwill. When you give first, consistently and sincerely, people naturally want to help you back. For negotiation or sales, present a large ask first, then retreat to your real ask. The smaller request will feel like a relief and will seem far more reasonable in contrast. Part 3. Principle 2. Commitment and consistency. The second principle is commitment and consistency. Once we make a commitment, we have a nearly irresistible drive to behave consistently with that commitment. This applies even when our circumstances change, even when the original reason for our commitment no longer exists. Here's a simple but powerful experiment. On a New York City beach, researcher Thomas Moriarty staged a theft. Someone left a radio on a blanket and walked away. A thief then grabbed the radio and ran. Out of 20 attempts, only 4 bystanders tried to stop the theft. Most people didn't want to get involved. But when the experiment was slightly adjusted so that the person leaving the blanket first asked a nearby stranger, "Could you watch my things?" and the stranger said yes, 19 out of 20 tried to stop the theft, even physically confronting the thief. What changed? Just one word: yes. Once people made that small commitment to watch the belongings, they felt compelled to be consistent with it. This is the foot in the door technique. Get a small yes first. A big yes will follow. Here's a more extreme example. During the Korean War, Chinese captors did something brilliant with American prisoners of war. They didn't torture them. They ran a sophisticated psychological program. First, they would ask American soldiers to make small, seemingly harmless written statements. America is not perfect. Then slightly bigger ones. In China, unemployment is not a problem. Small written commitments, small essay assignments. Over time, these small commitments, especially because they were written and public, changed how the prisoners saw themselves. Many started genuinely identifying with pro-communist ideas. They had been shifted not by force, but by getting them to commit in writing, step by small step. Why is writing so powerful? Cialdini's research shows that written commitments are far more effective than verbal ones because they are active, they are effortful, and they are permanent. You can see them. Others can see them. This is also why publicly stated goals are more likely to be achieved. When you tell people you are going to do something, your consistency drive activates. You want to be someone who follows through. The lowball technique is another application. A car salesman offers you an incredible deal. You commit. You start imagining the car in your driveway. Then, just before you finalize, there's a problem. The price is a little higher than quoted, or a feature you thought was included turns out to be extra. Studies show that most people say yes anyway, because they have already made the internal commitment to buying. How to apply this in your life? Write down your goals. Do not just say them. The physical act of writing creates commitment. Take it further and share your goals publicly. This activates your consistency drive to protect your self-image. Start small with yourself. Want to start exercising? Do not commit to an hour every day. Commit to 5 minutes, then 10. The foot is already in the door. Your brain will want to stay consistent with the version of yourself who exercises. Watch out for this trap in your own decisions. Before you do something significant, ask yourself, am I doing this because it is still the right decision, or am I doing it because I'm trying to stay consistent with a past decision that may no longer make sense? This is how people stay in bad jobs, bad relationships, bad investments. They threw the first stone and feel they cannot walk away. Part 4. Principle 3. Social proof. The third principle is social proof. We decide what is correct by watching what other people think is correct. The more people who do something, the more right that thing appears to us. This is not weakness. In a complex world, watching what others do is a genuinely useful shortcut most of the time. But when someone exploits it, the results can be devastating. Here's a chilling real-world case. In 1964, a woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked in New York City. Over the course of 35 minutes, dozens of witnesses heard her screams. Not one called the police. The story shocked the world. How could this happen? Social psychologists John Darley and Dib Latane investigated. What they found was counterintuitive. The presence of more bystanders actually made individuals less likely to act, not more. Each person looked around, saw that no one else was reacting, and concluded that this must not be a real emergency. They used social proof in the wrong direction. No one is acting, so I should not act either. Now, here's how social proof is used in marketing and persuasion every single day. Bartenders salt their tip jars with a few dollar bills before the evening starts. Why? To create the impression that tipping is normal behavior in this bar. Once you see that others have tipped, tipping feels like the correct thing to do. Charity telethons spend enormous amounts of airtime listing the names of people who have already donated. Infomercials say over 1 million served. Nightclub owners create artificial waiting lines outside when there's plenty of room inside, because a line signals that the place must be worth going to. Advertisers say fastest growing product or best-selling brand because they don't need to prove the product is good, they only need to prove that other people think it's good. That's enough. Cialdini describes a phenomenon called the Werther effect. After a front-page suicide story is published in a newspaper, suicide rates around the surrounding area spike dramatically. People who were already vulnerable look for social proof that such an action is even possible, is even a response others have chosen, and they follow. The principle of social proof is so powerful it can cost lives. How to apply this in your life. To protect yourself when you feel the pull to do something because everyone is doing it, pause. Ask whether this is a situation where the crowd actually has good information, or whether everyone is just watching everyone else and no one is actually sure. In ambiguous situations, the crowd can be completely wrong. To use this ethically, when you want to influence others, show social proof. Testimonials work, reviews work. Showing that many similar people have made a similar decision works. If you're building a business, community, or cause, visible participation from others is one of your most powerful assets. One practical life tip from this chapter. In emergency situations, do not rely on the general crowd. If you need help, single out one specific person and make eye contact. Say, "You, in the red jacket, please call an ambulance." Assigning individual responsibility breaks the bystander effect and gets people to act. Part 5, Principle 4, Liking. The fourth principle is liking. We say yes more often to people we like. This sounds obvious, but the depth of how this works and how easily it's manipulated will surprise you. Cialdini identifies several key factors that make us like someone. The first is physical attractiveness. Research consistently shows that attractive people are judged as more talented, more intelligent, and more honest, even by trained professionals who should know better. In studies of criminal sentencing, attractive defendants received significantly lighter sentences than unattractive defendants for the same crimes. In negligence lawsuits, juries awarding far less compensation when the defendant was better looking than the victim. Beautiful people get more job offers, more help when they need it, and more benefit of the doubt in every area of life. This is called the halo effect. One positive attribute casts a positive glow over everything else about a person. The second factor is similarity. We like people who are like us. Dress, background, interests, values, even small quirks. Car salesmen are trained to check customers' vehicles for bumper stickers, fishing gear, or family photos. If they spot a Boston Red Sox decal, they say, "Oh, are you a Sox fan? I followed them for years." Is it true? Maybe not, but it creates an instant feeling of connection. The third factor is familiarity and contact. We like what we know. Simply being exposed to something repeatedly makes us feel more positively toward it. This is called the mere exposure effect. Advertisers know this. That's why they run the same commercial 20 times, not to inform you, to make their product feel familiar. The fourth factor is association. If someone brings you good news, you like them better. If someone is present when bad news arrives, you like them less, even if they had nothing to do with the bad news. This is why weathermen are sometimes threatened by angry viewers. They associate the messenger with the storm. Advertisers exploit this through celebrity endorsements. We transfer our liking for a celebrity onto their product. We know that Michael Jordan doesn't personally approve every shoe design, yet our positive feeling for him activates a positive feeling for the brand. The fifth and most subtle factor is flattery. People who compliment us, even insincerely, are liked more. Even when we know the flattery might not be completely genuine, it still works. Compliments bypass our rational filters and go straight to our emotional preference for the person delivering them. How to apply this in your life. To protect yourself, when you're about to agree to something, ask whether your decision is based on the merits of the offer or on your feelings about the person making it. These are two separate questions. A genuinely good deal does not require you to like the salesman, and a charming salesman does not make a bad deal good. To ethically use liking, find genuine points of similarity with people you want to connect with. Be real about it. If you discover you actually have something in common with someone, mention it. People light up when they feel understood and seen. Give genuine compliments freely. Associate yourself with positive experiences for people. Be the person who brings good news and genuine warmth. Part 6, Principle 5, Authority. The fifth principle is authority. We are conditioned from birth to believe that obeying legitimate authority is right and disobeying it is wrong. Parents, teachers, governments, religious institutions, they all reinforce this. And for most situations, following authority saves us enormous time and cognitive energy. If a doctor tells us to take a medication, we don't need to independently research pharmacology. We trust the authority. But this automatic deference to authority is one of the most exploitable vulnerabilities in human psychology. The most striking evidence comes from Stanley Milgram's obedience experiments in the 1960s. Volunteers were told they were participating in a memory and learning experiment. They were instructed to administer electric shocks to a subject in another room every time he made a wrong answer. The shocks escalated in intensity, from mild to extreme. The subject could be heard screaming, begging to stop, eventually going silent. Here's the terrifying finding. Despite hearing screams and pleas for mercy, 65% of participants continued administering shocks all the way to the maximum level, simply because a researcher in a white lab coat calmly told them to continue. They could see the subject was in agony, yet the authority figure's instruction overrode their own moral judgment. The subjects were not monsters. Observers described grown adults trembling, sweating, stammering in distress, yet still continuing because the authority said so. They hated what they were doing. They didn't stop. Milgram concluded, ordinary people, simply doing their jobs and without any particular hostility on their part, can become agents in a terrible, destructive process. Now, here's where the authority principle gets even more unsettling. It's not just real authority that triggers our deference, it's the symbols of authority, titles, clothing, and trappings. In one study, a man in a business suit jaywalked, and 50% more pedestrians followed him into traffic than when a casually dressed person did the same thing. Same person, same action, different clothing, 3.5 times more compliance. In the medical world, a doctor wrote an abbreviated prescription that was misread as place in our ear when he meant right ear. The nurse administered eardrops into the patient's rectum. The instruction came from a doctor. She complied without question. Neither the patient nor the nurse questioned it. Cialdini tells a story of a famous actor, Robert Young, who played a doctor on a television series. An ad agency hired him to promote a caffeine-free coffee brand by talking about the health dangers of caffeine. The commercial was massively successful for years. People were taking health advice from an actor because he was mentally associated with a doctor character on TV. The symbol of authority, the association with a doctor, was enough. How to apply this in your life? To protect yourself, when you feel the pull of authority, ask 2 questions. First, is this person actually an authority in this specific field? Expertise in one area does not transfer to all areas. A famous athlete is not an expert in nutritional supplements. Second, is this authority actually being truthful here, or do they have a reason to mislead me? To ethically use authority, build genuine credentials and expertise. Share your qualifications honestly when they are relevant. Present your work in a professional manner. How you show up, how you dress, how you speak, all of it signals either competence or its absence. If you want to be taken seriously, invest in the signals of credibility as well as the substance behind them. Part 7. Principle 6. Scarcity. The 6th and final principle is scarcity. Opportunities seem more valuable to us when their availability is limited. Things we cannot have are automatically more desirable than things we can have easily. This is one of the most reliably exploited principles in all of marketing, and it runs so deep in our psychology that even knowing about it does not fully protect us from it. The psychological root of scarcity is what Cialdini calls psychological reactance. When something threatens to take away our freedom, we fight to keep it. When something is about to become unavailable, we suddenly want it more than ever. We value freedom and options, and anything that reduces them triggers a defensive desire. Think about this in everyday life. A salesperson says, "I have to tell you, we only have 2 of these units left at this price." What happens in your brain? Urgency, the sense that if you do not act now, you lose the opportunity forever. Most people will act, not because they fully evaluated the offer, but because scarcity triggered a reaction. Car dealerships use this masterfully. Someone else is coming to look at this car tomorrow morning. I cannot promise it will still be here. That statement has nothing to do with whether the car is a good fit for you or whether the price is fair, but it changes the emotional context of the decision entirely. The same mechanism explains why things that are censored or banned become more appealing. When the state of Florida tried to limit detergent use for environmental reasons, people began hoarding and black marketing the exact detergent being restricted. When information is classified as secret, it becomes far more attractive and credible to us than identical information presented openly. We want what we cannot have. Cialdini describes the Romeo and Juliet effect with real data. A study of 140 couples found that parental interference in a romantic relationship actually intensified the couple's feelings of love and desire to marry. Opposition created scarcity of the relationship, which made it feel more valuable. When the interference weakened, romantic feelings actually cooled. Here is a more subtle aspect of scarcity that most people miss. It's not just about limited quantity, it's about limited time and newly introduced restrictions. Cialdini cites research showing that scarcity is most powerful when something was previously available but is now being restricted. We react more intensely to losing something we had than to never having it in the first place. And this reaction is strongest when we are competing with others for the scarce item. Cookie studies by researchers Worchel, Lee, and Adewale showed that cookies in a nearly empty jar were rated as tastier than identical cookies from a full jar. Nothing about the cookies had changed, only their availability changed, and scarcity made them objectively better in the minds of the raters. How to apply this in your life? To protect yourself, when you feel urgency rushing a decision, stop. Ask whether the sense of urgency is coming from genuine circumstances or whether it has been artificially created. A real deadline is real. An invented deadline is a manipulation tool. The question to ask is, does this opportunity become worse because time is passing, or is the urgency purely psychological? To use scarcity ethically, be genuinely selective about what you offer people. Exclusive programs, limited enrollment, deadline-driven decisions, these are legitimate if the scarcity is genuine. Scarcity used honestly communicates that something is genuinely in demand. Scarcity manufactured dishonestly is manipulative and will backfire when people discover the lie. In your personal brand or business, being selective about who you work with actually increases your perceived value. If anyone can access you at any time, you become less valuable. If access to you is genuinely limited, it becomes more meaningful. Part 8. The Big Picture, the Epilogue, and the Deeper Lesson. Cialdini closes the book with a warning and a call to action. We live in an age of overwhelming complexity. The sheer volume of information, choices, products, and decisions we face every day has made our shortcut-based automatic responses not just common but necessary. We literally cannot evaluate every decision from scratch. We need mental shortcuts to function. And that's exactly what makes us vulnerable. Every one of the 6 principles Cialdini identified, reciprocation, commitment and consistency, social proof, liking, authority, and scarcity, works through our automatic processing. Someone learns to trigger the right shortcut, and the machine runs. We respond without thinking. We say yes without evaluating. We comply without realizing we are complying. The solution is not to distrust everyone. That would be exhausting and socially destructive. Most of the time, these shortcuts serve us well. A doctor's opinion really does deserve our deference. Genuine social proof from millions of satisfied customers really does indicate a good product. A real deadline really should motivate action. The solution is awareness and the ability to slow down when something feels off. Cialdini calls this recognizing the click-whir moment. When you feel a sudden, irrational urgency, an inexplicable desire to please, an automatic deference, a herd instinct, that's your signal to pause, not to refuse, but to think. Ask, what is triggering this response? Is the trigger genuine? Is the information it's giving me accurate in this situation? The people who weaponize these principles are counting on your autopilot. The moment you disengage autopilot and engage conscious evaluation, their power over you disappears. Part 9. The Complete Action Plan. Here is how to apply everything from this book starting today. Step 1. Learn to recognize the 6 triggers. Reciprocation is the feeling of obligation after receiving something. Commitment is the drive to stay consistent with a past decision. Social proof is the urge to do what others are doing. Liking is compliance driven by personal affection for someone. Authority is automatic deference to symbols of expertise or status. Scarcity is urgency created by limited availability. Memorize these 6. Name them when you feel them. Step 2. Build a pause habit. Whenever you feel a strong pull to say yes to anything significant, build in a pause. Ideally 24 hours. If someone tells you the offer expires in an hour, that pressure itself is a red flag. Legitimate offers survive reasonable thinking time. Step 3. Build genuine relationships with reciprocation. Give first. Give generously and without immediately expecting something back, not as a manipulation tactic, but as a lifestyle. People who consistently add value to others build networks of natural goodwill that pay dividends for decades. Step 4. Use commitment to lock in your best behaviors. Write your goals publicly. Set up accountability partners. Make your commitments visible and document it. Once you write it down and tell someone, your consistency drive works for you instead of against you. Step 5. Verify authority claims before deferring. When an authority figure is advising you on something important, do one thing. Look for a second opinion. Not because the first authority is wrong, but because the act of seeking a second opinion forces you to think rather than comply automatically. Step 6. Manage scarcity triggers in high-stakes decisions. When urgency arises around money, relationships, or major life choices, ask yourself, what would I decide if I had all the time in the world? If the answer would be different from your urgent state decision, the urgency itself is a warning. Step 7. Audit your own influence. Look at how you present yourself, your work, your requests to others. Are you giving people a reason to want to help you, trust you, and believe in you? Genuine competence, warmth, and credibility are not manipulative. They are human. Build them intentionally. Let us bring this together. Robert Cialdini spent years undercover studying the most effective persuaders in the world. What he found was 6 fundamental weapons that bypass rational thinking and trigger automatic compliance. Reciprocation tells us we must repay what we receive. Commitment and consistency tells us we must honor what we have said or done before. Social proof tells us to look at what others are doing to decide what is right. Liking tells us to say yes to people we feel good about. Authority tells us to follow those who appear to know better. And scarcity tells us to fight for what we might lose. These are not evil forces. They are the social glue that makes civilization possible. But in the hands of someone who understands how to trigger them artificially, they become weapons. And you have been on the receiving end of all 6, probably today, probably without knowing it. Now you know, and knowing changes everything. The aware person is not the one who never feels the pull of these principles. The aware person is the one who notices the pull, names it, and chooses consciously from that point forward. That is the difference between being lived by your psychology and actually living your life. If this breakdown gave you something real, something you can take into your week and actually use, then do one thing right now. Subscribe to Millionaire Playbook. Every video on this channel is built the same way. Real books, real research, broken down into real tools you can implement immediately. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because the more people understand how influence works, the harder it becomes for anyone to use it against them. And remember, the best time to understand how persuasion works is before someone uses it on you. That time is right now. See you in the next one.